What I'm going to show you here is a shortcut to quickly estimate a fake shadow that, for example, is cast by a light that is from the side. And right now I treat this light, for example, as being a sunlight. So it is really to the left of my object. And what's really important is, technically speaking, you need to figure out the length of your shadow. You see here again is a shadow triangle. So for example, this stuff we don't necessarily need for right now. I'm just going to simplify the scene just a second. So maybe like this. Okay. So we know somewhere up here is our sun casting a light, touching this point, going down. Here is my vertical line. This is where it touches the ground. So I have a horizontal line, which is parallel to the horizon line as well. And then where these two lines meet, this edge casts this shadow. So for example, this. Okay. Now I can take this and, for example, move this one up till, for example, it's there, and then I move this one forward to the right till, for example, now my diagonal touches this point. So there, now I know this is roughly this long. And then I have to do it one more time. For example, for my mid part. So here I move everything down till there, and then to the right. So my angled line touches the tip. And there would then be my shadow. So this is a very fast way to draw, but it's kind of like an approximation. Shadows are going left and right, not really back. Nothing wrong with it. Might not necessarily look very realistic. It has a graphical quality to it. And let's see if maybe we can make the shadow shorter. So maybe I would like to have something like this. So this should be kind of like my shadow. So I'm going to copy, paste this, and see maybe where this could be used here. So I have to move this one over a little bit. So you have to, if you make those lines, your shadow lines, your triangles, they all have to be really perfectly parallel. Otherwise, your shadow is not going to work. And then I'm going to copy and paste. And let's see. Okay, well, actually, I have to make this object a little bit bigger. So hold on 1 second. There. Okay, that should do it. To the right. There. Okay, and let's see, there we have it, there and there. And there's kind of my shadow. So you see, this is a very short shadow. And because the light source is so close, it grounds a little bit, but you can't really read a lot out of the shadow. So judging the shape or seeing the shape inside the drop shadow here is not as easy as, for example, it was in, hold on 1 second, I hope I have enough undos, in this shape. Maybe this is a little bit too long, could maybe this long, doesn't have to be that long. Okay, so that's, for example, like a sideway drawing for a drop shadow. Now let's go maybe to something like this, where we have a more uneven shape, so it's kind of like an L. And again, same principles apply to here. So here we have actually our front edge. take this and move them accordingly. There I have my next edge. And this one I move to there, lining up my diagonal with this point, my ground line, align the lower point there, there. Whoops, wrong keys. And there's a shadow. Okay, so those are actually the most important steps to understand how to construct shadows when you use sunlight coming from the vanishing point or maybe from the side. If you want to have a shadow come towards you or going to the vanishing point, and also if you want to be a little bit more realistic, how, for example, to work with a one-point light and cast a more realistic shadow. That approach, for example, is going to be very, very useful when you do interior drawings, because there the shadow casting is a little bit more elaborate and their shadows really have to be realistic. But in product design sketching, those shadows are not too bad, but I feel like it's always nicer when the shadows don't necessarily go left and right, but actually to the vanishing point. So maybe what we can do just to do this, let's say I take this line and, for example, put this one to there, go to there. And the reason why I do this is simply try to see where those points might be. So you see, this seems to be close, and this one I try to line up there so that each point is kind of like lined up correctly, and then the same here. Okay, there and there. So see, by just having this lower line a little bit rotated, I kind of like treat it in a way that I have a light that is not really on the left, but a little bit below or in front my object. And then your shadow will also be a little bit more rotated, and based on how low your light source is, or how far, for example, this lower line is rotated, the more, for example, it will feel like that those lights will go also to the vanishing point. And of course, because those lines essentially are actually nearly parallel, even when I rotate it so that it looks like the shadow will grow to the vanishing point, those lines will not converge at the vanishing point. So you will see that your object is actually constructed in a two-point perspective, but your shadow feels not really being two-point. So I feel this technique works okay when you make the shadows really short, but otherwise you will quickly see that actually there is a disconnect between the perspective approach of your object and your shadows. So in general, I feel like each technique actually has its valid point, and it's really good to really master each one. So based on your situation, you can then simply switch to what construction technique you use to, in your best way, communicate, for example, the value or creative ability of a drop shadow.